Marx, to understand his ideas, I thought it would be better to know the person first and his transformation from that individual to a theorist, a thinker, and the philosopher. So we will get to know what makes him think and see the world from that different perspective, and which has changed not only of his friends, family, but the people and their perspectives to look at the structure and arrangement of society from the point of view that he could see and understand. If you remember, while we were talking about Karl Marx and his transformation, we have seen that, or we have discussed that Hegel, who played a very significant role initially to make him look at society from a different lenses. And what was that? If you remember that video I played in the previous class, in which the philosophy of history, Hegel says, humanity advances and progresses only because of conflict, of war, revolutions, and that is through the struggle of oppressed and the oppressor. So this has been a journey of the human race. Thus, the society has developed according to Friedrich Hegel. But we all, as a student of literature, know that every theorist, or most often in the history of the philosophy and theory, that you find that the disciple, the one who studies and try to and learn to understand the society, often come up with an idea which is radical than his master. You can take example of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. So the disciple often is more radical and come up with a new and a different ideas, sometimes contrast against or a dissent to his master. So Karl Marx is also of such uh, uh, ideas that he comes up. Hegel's when he says that humanity advances with conflicts, has a broader perspective. Later, his disciples fall into a different categories. One, those who involve in the debate of that Hegelian spiritual and conservative side, and some are radical, and Marx is one of them. So when it comes to Marx, Marx sees this struggle of the society is not spiritual, it's not philosophical, but of what? Materialistic. He finds the struggle is the struggle between this oppressor and the oppressed is the struggle of this survival, the materialistic needs of human beings. If somewhere in your syllabus, if you have studied Derek Walcott's poem, I forgot the title, but this Wangcho Bosai and some of our students is there in our syllabus. It is a poem about that Kikiyu movement, in which Derek Walcott talks about the struggle between the colonized and the colonizers, in which both kill each other. So while talking about the nature, the forces of the nature, he brings one example in the poem, that he says when a tiger kills or hunts, it is for his need. And there is a cycle, the food cycle. So that killing, that hunting, that ferocious act is accepted by the law of nature. And there is nothing beyond that mere need to fill his hunger. But when it comes to the killing between the colonizer and the colonized, is something beyond that. It is something beyond the natural law, the law of the nature. And what is that? According to him, it is just a greed for power. It is not like that the colonizers do not have food or do not fulfill their basic needs, but they exploit the colonized. They kill, they torture for that ideological and political power, which most of the philosophers and the theorists and thinkers say are vain, useless, but nobody understands. But when it comes to Marx, Marx could able to understand that perspective, the construction of this society from this materialistic perspective, materialistic point of view. And he says that these were the ideas that we say initially Karl Marx was struggling with. Who is God? Life is a riddle. What is man? What is life? Kind of the questions that he was struggling initially. And this is the background of the society which Karl Marx could able to see and understand his, social and political theory. What has made him think that the struggle and the development and the division of society is materialistic? This is a background, the Industrial Revolution, which has entirely changed the face and the structure of society. What was that change? What was that shift? The society after the Industrial Revolution shifted from that, rural to the urban, to the cities, later turned metropolitan cities. And if you see this, the people living in that rural area, dependent on the farming, though they have a less income, they may not be rich, but they are the owners. They are the people who are free. But when it comes to the shift, the change after the Industrial Revolution, these people who are free and owner of their land became the laborers. And the land was given to a handful of people who are rich, the industrialists. And you see the situation. The free have changed or have become the slaves. The owners have become the laborers. And thus, there was a big gap. The value emerged between the industrialists and the laborers. And thus the exploitation. It is not only in the context of the elders, but even children also have become the victim of this change. Therefore, Karl Marx says, the history of all society has been the history of class struggle. Thus he begin his book, the Communist Manifesto. This was the first writing which is published, and you find the base of Marxist theory in this treatise, and you can call it an essay, which is published in 1848 in German and later translated in many other languages, initially in English, French, Italian, Flemish, and Danish. He begins this Communist Manifesto, the introduction, the idea of his and his followers. The first statement that he makes in the Communist Manifesto, that is, the history of all society, unlike Hegel, he says has been the history of class struggle. And he says, free man and slave, lord and serf, guild and master, and a journeyman. In a word, oppressor and oppressed stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now which is abstract, and sometimes it's open, a fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. What he says? It is this struggle. If we go in the history of human race, you'll always find the struggle between the classes, either a free man or a slave, or a patrician and plebeian, oppressor and oppressed, which has been a constant struggle. And this struggle is the history of all human society. And how he finds this struggle? From that materialistic point of view. He says it's not a spiritual struggle, but it is materialistic. How does that? So materialistic? Take examples to understand this. The construction of Indian society from the beginning. You see these all castes and classes in India and their arrangement according to, as it is generally, spread and, told, that it is an arrangement according to the occupation. Let's take the hierarchy in Hinduism. Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Do you think this relationship between this, classification and their interdependency is spiritual? But you find that this interdependency and structure is purely a materialistic. And later you find the struggle. So Marx, when he says that it has been, if we go in the history of human race, that the society has developed, society has changed and structured accordingly for their materialistic fulfillment. He refers to some of the incidents in his Communist Manifesto. Says, in the earlier epoch of history, we find almost everywhere a complicated arrangement of society into various orders, as we can see even in India. A manifold gradation of social rank. It's not only an arrangement for the benefits of all, but for the benefit of the power, the powerful. Who arranges this? Who makes these structures? the people with power, and power lies in the wealth. Power lies in the political power. Thus, the power lies in the knowledge and the information. And Marx says all these collection of power is for the materialistic gain and benefits. Therefore, one exploits the other. Therefore, one tortures the other, makes work for his benefits, for his power. In ancient Rome that he refers, he says there are patricians, knights, plebeian, and slaves. In the Middle Ages, we have feudal lords, vassals, guild masters, journeymen, apprentice, serfs. In almost all of these classes, again, subordinate and gradations. So while referring to his statement that he makes, history of all society has been the history of class struggle, that he refers to these societies. Then these were the societies were often looked at. Rome, for example, for development, for creativity. But even these societies are not an exception to this division and the struggle. You also have, you also can find the clash between the slaves and the masters in the history of Rome. And by referring to this, Karl Marx refers to his time, the modern bourgeois society that has taken birth, sprouted from the ruins of the feudal society. You know the history of this Industrial Revolution and the French Revolution. What was the basic idea of French Revolution? What was that when the society in France and England went against the masters, the kings, and the landlords? Because of the height of the torture, there was a society divided. There is a group of people who are more in number, work in the farm, toil day night, and produce grain and the different products. And finally, they have to, give taxes to the kings and the landlords. What they do? Why they have to give? Okay, it is up to this, it is fine if they could able to produce for the sake of their protection and arrangement and systematic running of this society, they will be given the taxes. But are these taxes at the cost of the lives and the hunger of the people, those who produce? grain, there comes a time when these people think that it is the time to go against, to raise their voice. And who are those people behind this consciousness? An educated middle class, a business class, who are partially wealthy and conscious of their rights, become the middlemen and bring that consciousness, awareness among the masses. And these masses, along with the leadership or under the leadership of these middle class, go against, fight, and demolish this feudal system. A class which brings this consciousness, which led this struggle and fight against the exploitation of these masses, later on becomes the one, gets in the shoes of the monarchy, landlords, and become one of them. And that society, which Karl Marx calls at his time, is a modern bourgeois society that has emerged and was taken birth from the ruins of the feudal society, has not done away with the class antagonism, but it has established a new classes, new conditions of oppression, and new forms of struggle in place of the old ones. Let me bring you to this, the history of different theories. For example, structuralism and post-structuralism or deconstruction. The one which struggles to get away with that center creates the center. The one which goes against to the existing, ideas, establishes their own. So does this bourgeois. Instead of demolishing that imbalance, division, and the value between the rich and the poor, this bourgeois society establishes new classes, new conditions of operations, and new forms of struggle in place of the old ones. And here Karl Marx says, our epoch, means the time, is the epoch of bourgeoisie, possesses, however, this distinctive feature. What is that feature that he talks about? It has simplified the class antagonism. Society as a whole is more and more splitting up into two great hostile camps. Earlier, there were separate, different ranks, social ranks. But with the emergence of the bourgeoisie, They have divided the society into, or they have split up the society into two great hostile camps, into two great classes, directly facing each other. They are the proletariat and bourgeoisie. His entire ideas and the theory is based on the explanation of this social structure, this division of proletariat and bourgeoisie. And he says the history, the struggle, and the development of the society is the history of the struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Who are the proletariat? That he later talks about are all responsible for creating, producing the material needs and are the means of production on which the entire so-called powerful, rich and wealthy society depends on. But in contrary, who are at the receiving end, who are the one exploited? The proletariats. From the serf of the Middle Ages sprang the chartered burg of the earliest towns. From these burgesses, the first elements of the bourgeoisie were developed. He refers to the initial period of colonization. The discovery of America, how these people have been to these places with the purpose not to civilize, not to bring change and development, but to gain the profit, to gain the human power or laborers and make use of their make use of them for their prosperity, materialistic greed. The feudal system of industry, Marx says, in which industrial production was monopolized by the closed guilds, now no longer sufficed for the growing wants of the new markets. The manufacturing systems took its place. The guild masters were pushed aside by the manufacturing middle class. The division of labor between the different corporate guilds vanished in the face of the division of labor in each single workshop. The greed to accumulate the wealth and power is so much that Marx sees in this structure is at the cost of human, or at the cost of humanity, or at the cost of human suffering, who are all responsible for their benefit and the pleasure. Who are unrecognized, unacknowledged. The people behind the development, the people behind this, you know, development of the society are not recognized, and in contrast, they are exploited. So there you find, Marx says, the structure and construction of society is so abstract. You will never see the people working behind the curtain. While reading this, I was thinking about the present situation. One example, I was talking to my friend who is a sculptor, who is an artist, working here in the Department of Fine Arts as a guest faculty. So before joining this place, in the initial stages, while he was studying and taking his education in Mumbai, he used to work in the film industry. Like film industry is in demand or requires lots of artists. For example, creating all that, stages and that, their needs, because according to their script they need a place to create, so they required lots of artists. And he was narrating me the history, the stories, that how, for example, if you might have all watched this Bahubali movie. When you remember the movie Bahubali, whom you remember? Prabhas, those heroines, and more. If we go beyond, and very few people even think of and remember, that is the producer or the director. But to create that movie, or to bring it to that, complete, into that complete form, thousands of people might have been working. But who gets the recognition? The hero and the heroine, who are on the screen, who are the face, who enjoys the entire success. But while talking to him, I got to know that how thousands of people day night work without food, hungry, and are left unacknowledged, unrecognized. So I find that is one of the very relevant example to understand this concept of base and superstructure that Marx talks about, and is a basic idea of his theory. So the base is often who is the most significant element in the creation of the product, is often left unacknowledged. And the face, the people, those who invest, are rich, have the wealth gets the entire credit of that creation, and they become the face. They enjoy the profit as well as the fame and name. That is a superstructure. And Marx says this structure is so complicated, so abstract, it is difficult to unfold. Therefore, he tries to unfold, bring to the notice of the society that how things are working, how things, why the mass suffer and the few enjoy the power, name, fame, and all the benefits. So this idea has brought the storm, which doesn't mean that these things are not in existence before him, but he could able to see and unfold and make it clear, share that with his, people, the group that he addresses. And that becomes his theory, which later changes the entire, face of the society. Later we will be talking on how this theory is important and will be used as a tool to understand and analyze the literature. Okay? So how he sees, how he understands the society from this, he understands the society and unfolds those abstract structures from these materialistic perspectives. The history of struggle between the haves and have-nots, between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, is the struggle of the material, the wealth, and the ideology. In the meantime, the markets kept ever growing, the demand ever rising, even manufacturer no longer sufficed. Thereupon, steam and machinery revolutionized the industrial production. In course of time, in course of the development, it is not the human has become the slave of a human, but that unfulfilled greed of a man makes a man slave of a machine. And you know the exploitation, as I was showing you some, few photographs earlier, how the condition of the human beings have changed. You know what? The result of this industrial development is not only the shift of society from that urban to, the villages to the cities, but you see the life, the quality of life when people live in cities more in number. Mumbai is the best example of this. Mumbai is the best example of base and superstructure. There is a section of the city which is so clean, so equipped with all those, you know, needs which we cannot even imagine. And there is also a society, there's also who are more in number live in the slums. And you know how this, the other, the society which is clean, which enjoys all these, you know, benefits, are dependent on the other, dependent on the people who lives in the slum. They are the one who keep these clean societies clean. But ever recognized? They suffer. They are hungry. They live in 10 by 10 room, the entire family. They're also the citizens of this country, a part of democracy, a part of humanity. But why you find this difference? Many have many explanations to these situations and conditions. But Marx looks at it from this, you know, idea of materialistic greed, for which a particular society has created a structure. Why this theory is relevant and important to study and understand today? There is one more situation which is very much, it's a burning, you know, news at present in India. Farmers struggle, fight against the power that is political as well as the power of economy. There is no doubt that by allowing a business class to enter and take control of the farmers and the fields, no doubt there will be a profit because they work for that. But as I was referring to the condition at the time of Industrial Revolution of the people who are working in the farm, it will be the same in India today. How does that? The industrialist, the businessman, there is one term, you know, we have in that, you know, farm bills. According to which there will be a contract between the farmers and the investors. And who are the investors? Let me tell you who are the investors. All the big names in the business, they get money from the Indian government or the banks. Bank has money. Whose is that money? Is it government's money? Is the governments which, you know, print all these notes and, you know, put that in the bank? It is the people's money. It is yours and my money and my family's, specifically those who are working in the farms. They save 1,000, 1,000, 10,000, 15,000, and they put that in the bank. And bank collects, and that bank gives loan to these businessmen. They invest and make profit out of it. So these are the businessmen who take money from the bank gives them money, they invest in our farms, and they make us laborers. That is the plan, isn't it or not? If you have to understand this in a simple, a very lucid way, this law says that in this contractual farming, and why contractual farming is more dangerous? The most of the farmers in India may be literate only up to writing their names and signing, or some are not even that much literate. How they will be able to understand the rules and regulations made by so-called intelligent and professional lawyers? They won't be able to understand, and they will be asked to sign on these contracts, which is, I'm sure any layman will able to understand, will support the benefit of those business tycoons. And the entire land which belongs to them, who are the owners of those land, will one day turn into the laborers of their own land, and will depend on the rules and regulations and the directions of the business tycoons, those who enter and invest. Therefore, the farmers of the India are intelligent enough to understand this, and they are fighting for their rights, so they are fighting for their existence. Now you find a man who thinks and writes more than 150 years before, his ideas are still relevant and important to understand and read the abstract construction of this society and the clash of powers. So the society now, which is important to understand, is it the society which is happy and are called developed only materialistically rich, wealthy, and have profits, or the society which is happy and peaceful and have freedom? That is the biggest question which we need to ask ourselves. And our people in the power also need to ask these questions, and the intellectuals. Therefore, it is not easy in India to come up with such ideas which makes the farmers slave, proletariat, which other countries have achieved years back, decades back. So therefore, this theory is very much relevant to understand the abstract construction of the societies and ideas in politics, in literature, and culture. So this is a base of the Marxist literary theory, which will help us as a tool while we make while we analyze and read and understand the text, no matter whatever the text that is. So it is a tool which will help you to unfold the ideas in the text. So the modern industry, Marx says, has established the world market for which the discovery of America paved the way. This market has given an immense development to commerce, to navigation, to communication by land. This development has, in its turn, reacted on the extension of industry. And in proportion as industry, commerce, navigation, railways extended, in the same proportion, the bourgeoisie developed, increased its capital, and pushed into the background every class handed down from the Middle Ages. So with the development of these materialistic constructions, there is one class which has become more powerful, and by becoming more powerful, it has pushed, crushed the other who are actually behind this development. We see, therefore, how the modern bourgeoisie is itself the product of a long course of development, of a series of revolutions in the modes of production and exchange. Which is that society which lives in the mansions? For example, I'll not take the name of those people for the specifically maintaining the decorum of this class, for not making it a more, though it is the class which we really need to talk the politics and understand our society. But let me, keeping this name, undisclosed. There is a home in Mumbai which is made up of thousands of crores. Do you think these people living in that home, handful of 2, 3, 4, 5 in number, have earned that money, have worked, toiled in the, in the farm, and then earned that much of money to construct that home, to build that home? Who are the people behind? There are lakhs of people who have been working for them. And there are lakhs of people whose money has been, used by them. So they could, build the thousands of crore rupees mansion for themselves. Why this? Nobody asked the questions. And not even that question, makes us or awakens us that how we are living in a society of such a great imbalance. But Marx, as a theorist, as a philosopher, could able to see this. And thus he laid down his, ideas. The platform where people could come and discuss and understand their role in the construction of this society. So thus, the Marxist literary theory plays a very significant role from its origin till today. Each step in the development of the bourgeoisie was accompanied by a corresponding political advance of that class. An oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility, it became an armed and self-governing association in the medieval commune. Here, independent urban public, their taxable third estate of the monarchy. Afterwards, in the period of manufacturer proper, serving either the semi-feudal or the absolute monarchy as a counterpoise against the nobility, and in fact, cornerstone of the great monarchies in general, the bourgeoisie has at last, since the establishment of the modern industry and of the world market, conquered for itself in the modern representative state exclusive political sway. The executive of the modern state is but committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. If you see the history of human race, you find this proletariat, which Marx termed them, have been the support of all these monarchy, landlords, bourgeoisie, and their power. There is one, you find a kind of, link when Marx was trying to understand and unfold this abstract construction of the society and ideas. Like, he has been revisiting the histories, and every epoch, a certain period where, because development is as he says, is a struggle between the classes, and from then onwards a new society establishes, a new ideas come, replacing the old one. But in course of time, you find again they develop, they raise, they come up with of such divisions which later again turn into a clash. Whether you call it a clash between the farmers and the monarchy, the clash between proletariat and the bourgeois, a clash between colonizers and the colonized, a clash between poor and the rich. You find this is a development, a change of ideas. So all this history of the development of human society, Marx sees from the perspective of materialistic gain. So he talks about the base and the superstructure. The bourgeoisie has played a most revolutionary role in history. Wherever it has got the upper hand, has put an end to all feudal, patriarchal, idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound man to his natural superiors, and has left no other bond between man and man than naked self-interest, than callous cash payment. You know what is one more change that Marx brings to our notice? If we go back to, we'll be able to understand this better if you have read or heard stories from your elders, that earlier we used to buy things by exchanging grains and the products. For example, I have seen my mother, giving these grains or rice to buy puff rice. मूढ़ी मूढ़ी खरीदने के लिए मैंने देखा है मेरे मतलब वो राइस उसको देके उसके बदले में मूढ़ी लेते थे. I have seen my brother was selling bottles, like earlier these people used to come, these vendors in the villages. Still I think that practice is there. They come with this watermelon and papaya and all kind of fruits, and to buy that I've seen my brother was giving these empty bottles, selling empty bottles. In return of those empty bottles, he used to give a watermelon. So these are the very recent examples. But if we go back or revisit the stories and the treaties or the books, or even talk to the people, those who are into their 80s, 90s, and more than that, they will tell you that earlier people used to exchange things to buy and sell. But with the development, so while doing that, what is the benefit of that? You could able to understand the worth of a grain, and there is no much difference between the price and exchange value. But in course of time, when people call themselves they are civilized, getting civilized and developed, the entire system today is now run by a cash. This is a product of the industrialization. And this is the origin, this system is an origin and is a, we can say, developed by the clash or by this materialistic, a group who are trying to accumulate the power. and have created such an abstract chalan, we can call it, you know, in the form of money and cash. So this bourgeoisie, whenever it has got the upper hand, they have divided or taken man away from the man for their naked self-interest. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism in the icy water of egotistical calculations. It has resolved a personal worth into exchange value. So what is a new development? In course of this, change, Marx brings this idea, or asserts, telling that human value and work has been exchanged with money. The labor has been exchanged with money. So human beings have mere turned out a product. Earlier, we used to exchange things. Now, in course of time, human labor has also become the product. Indirectly, human beings have become the product, the subject, which is being exchanged. So when human becomes an object and sell labor, that value as a human being has reduced. So often they have seen as what? As an object. So they are exploited in the industries. Even today, this present government is not an exception to that. If you have seen these recent changes, if you are updated with, people were talking about, it was a recent news in Delhi, they have increased the number of hours for the people, working hours for the people working in the industries. It means what? They're looking for the profit. That is fine, which they call it a development, which they call it the growth of the country. But what is the value of that growth at the cost of the suffering of the citizens of this country? Is the question to be asked. It is the question that one has to ask to themselves. Therefore, the definition of development and progress changes according to your perspective to look at it. Why we want development and change, the growth, for the happiness and betterment of the society. Why we need all these, roads, constructions of roads, and all kind of, internet and all these things? For happiness or comfort. But if you're buying comfort at the cost of someone else's suffering, do you call that is a development, is a progress? But human beings have always been, the history of human race is the history of such exploitations, or a progress at the cost of somebody else's suffering. And that somebody else is more in number all the time. You go and refer. That is what Marx is trying to explain through his theory, through his ideas and his philosophy. Isn't it or not? The bourgeoisie has stripped off its hollow every occupation hitherto honored and looked up to with a reverent awe. It has converted the physicians, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into its paid wage laborer. What is the change that he talks? And trying to understand that abstract structure which people give name, or which people name that as a progress, development, change, civilize. In this society, which Marx says, all these, the gifted, creative people have become an object of exploitation. And how that is? Their creativity, their knowledge is being exchanged, or they all have turned into a paid wage laborers. You find that even today. So, for example, you work with an artist or a scientist. Scientists are no less than an artist because they are so creative. So they could able to see, understand the things beyond that you and me or the common people can able to see, understand and imagine and construct. So these people have become a commodity for the bourgeois or the society. So this bourgeois has torn away from the family its sentimental veil that has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation. So how does, in course of time, slowly, steadily, we all have turned so individualistic. We see and we behave accordingly. We don't care. You go to Mumbai, you go to these metropolitan cities. I was in Chandigarh. I was staying in a hotel, and it was a summer, and that hotel was so, like, it has a big glass window. So first time I was there, and since it was too, because the weather is so, you know, we can say, in summer you cannot go out in the afternoon in Delhi, and even in most of the metropolitan cities, because the weather, because of the pollution and all such kind of things, and because these cities have, emerged and established, but on the cost of, cutting plant these trees and destroying nature. So they have to, face that situation and weather. So when I was in Chandigarh, since I could not go out in the afternoon, I was standing, in that window and watching. I saw hardly anybody was walking on the road, but thousands of vehicles, specifically cars, you know, are running. And I could see only, I still, remember that, image, you know only cars were passing there. And I could see, since it's very near to the road, I find in every car hardly you find two people. Means each car you find only one person, and they're driving, just driving. I went crazy, because I'm a person who born in a village, you know studied in such cities, and I spent most of my time in the, schools and universities before coming here, and now also in the university. So by being there, when I saw this, I felt so awkward, and I was started thinking about how human beings have turned so busy, individualistic. You don't find groups, people sitting and chatting and talking, laughing. The more person with wealth, responsibilities, and such, the one who runs after this materialistic, achievements, will turn individualistic, lonely. Exceptions are always there, but you will able to see this. So this growth of industrial development, which Marx looks at it from these his lenses, he finds that the system of bourgeoisie have torn away people from the families, its sentimental veil, and has reduced the family relations to a mere money relations. Today, a brother fights with his brother, and siblings fight for the property. You know, the way we grown up in, like, by being, when the siblings are young, you find that love, affection, care. But I'm not telling, as I said, exceptions are there. Or we India, and the culture in India is a way better than the Europeans, no? Because we are still in that, we call our society is developing. I'm happy. I always pray that till I die, let this country be developing country, because at least some values, people be there with you. We don't want development at the cost of human relations, love, care, affection, families. If you have read, it's a data, it's a research. European countries, though they are developed, or you not European countries, but you can call it the developed countries, the countries which are in the list of you know developed and having that scientifically have brought lots of changes in the human life. The data says, or the research says, you know, I read somewhere, in an article that today the more number of cases of the people who are suffering from the mental illness are not in the developing countries but in the developed countries. You know what would be the reason? If that country has all such kind of benefits, uh, and and all these materialistic uh, elements to support them, to keep them happy, then why they are suffering? I think the reason which you also, if you find, if you see into, if from that perspective, you'll find the answer of, this question in Marxist literary theory. And Marx says here, in his Communist Manifesto, so this bourgeoisie was changed, turned the society into an individualistic society, have taken an individual, the person, away from his family and established the relation, a mere a money relation. The bourgeoisie has disclosed how it came to pass that the brutal display of vigor in the Middle Ages, which reactionaries so much admired, found its fitting complement in the most slothful indolence. It has been the first to show what man's activity can bring about. It has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and Gothic cathedrals. It has conducted expeditions that put in the shade all former migrations of nations and crusades. So, thus, you find how Karl Marx see the change in the society, and he says the reason behind that is that greed of a handful of people who struggle to accumulate the power, materialistic and political, has changed the society into these segments, which are, you know, are dangerous and poisonous and destructive. So, the bourgeoisie has, through its exploitation of the world market, given a cosmopolitan character to production and consumption in every country. So he explains and put forward his ideas. These are the reasons that he gives, and these are the elements that he tries to disclose and unfold to bring awareness, make people realize of their role and status in the society, which many of them do not understand, like you and me. There are so many things are happening around us. We don't care. Farmers are fighting, okay, fighting. The students are also on the roads asking the things to happen on time, exams and kind of things. Okay, let them be on the road. We live in our mansions, we live in our homes. So what is the role of these people, theorists and philosophers, to give you this platform to, and it is not that we just be and live our life. It is because when we don't care, we don't see, we don't understand, and the things that most often we do not understand, we don't get interest into. So that is the reason. So the role that he plays, and he brings the storm with his ideas, which has later changed the entire society, the structure of society. That role is to create a platform for the people like you at that time, you and me at that time, to understand their role, to understand their contribution in the system that they live in. So he could able to, you know, create a group of people, thousands of people, for thinking about and fighting for their rights. Again, taking you back to his initial statement, the history of the societies are the history of the clash and the struggle between the groups, between the classes. And so does there is a beginning of a new era with his ideas. So by recognizing, identifying, and bringing to the floor and to the notice of the audience and the people, those who are at the receiving end, Marx creates that consciousness, in the society, and later lay down his solution for these all such kind of problems in his theory of communism, which you have lots of critics, because this is the human history. Again, anonymously, no idea have been accepted, because there are groups, people go after their benefits. So people call his ideas are utopian. What is communism? That we will be discussing in the next class, and conclude this theory and continue our other ideas based on this platform and the background that we have created, you know, and discussed so far. So his theory not only raises questions, as we have discussed so far, but also gives solution according to his understanding in his concept of the communism.